Hello, everybody. My name is Erin, and today I'm here to convince you guys that writing is a great way to learning a new language. When I was last given the opportunity to speak at this gathering, I talked about the input and the output method. I've been using this method for seems like almost a decade now. It's a way to break your study methods into two parts. And one thing that I've learned over this time, it kind of evolved. So I wanted to return to let you guys know a little bit more about the ways that I've updated my output methods, specifically writing and how writing can improve your language learning over time and what you can do about it. So just to go over what input and output are for those who aren't familiar. You can think of input as like downloading information into your head. You can use a language app. You could watch a show on Netflix. You could listen to a podcast or read an article that you're interested in your target language. Whatever you do to you do your input is basically how you're going to build your vocabulary, how you're going to understand the grammar and the syntax of the language. So output is going to be basically what you're putting out into the world. Um, when I say that, I think that it can help your pronunciation, your phonics, um, your writing skills, your recall, confidence, and expression when you're speaking. All of these are parts of what you need to focus on when you are doing your language output. I can say for myself that I've studied 12 spoken and 2 signed languages, and my proficiency in them ranges from like just okay to like a babbling baby. But I can tell you that I'm pretty sure that my language learning has improved a lot just from writing. Um, Here you can see an example of what is called receptive and productive skills. So a lot of times people will say that they can understand a language, but they don't entirely know how to speak. Well, that's because if you're not doing enough output, you'll have a lot of receptive language skills, but not enough productive language skills. Productive language skills would be you're speaking, you're using the language fluently and being understood. Um, of course, if you're doing more input than output, there's going to be an imbalance there. And the larger the gap, the harder it is to keep up, like the harder it is to make that balance work. So again, just from writing, I can tell you that it does help a lot. So on the slide, you see an example of just testing from reading, which is input, how much you might know from how many words that you're familiar with. This is just a way to gauge like learning proficiency and how much you've improved over time. But I'm going to show you how to use handwriting to learn a language. There are benefits to using writing. One of them, of course, is enhanced memory retention and language reinforcement because you're probably going to be using the same words again and again, but in different ways. You're going to use verbs in different tenses. You're going to probably be doing somewhat of a and response, maybe reading something and responding to it, listening to something and responding to it, or even just thinking about something and putting it on paper, which gives you a deeper understanding of the language. Um, it of course gives you improved spelling. And I honestly think that one thing that really does improve your spelling, I mean, pronunciation kind of follows your spelling. So I realized that this was working when I started studying French because I really have the worst pronunciation. I Googled a phonics video and ended up watching the French phonics video and realizing the more I learned about the phonics, the more I was understanding how certain things were pronounced. It was easier for me to read and therefore easier for me to write. it was easier for me to say things because I understood the patterns between the letters and the sounds that they made. And so now I can bring this to you. So there are tips that I could recommend for you guys if you would like to improve your writing. The first thing is, of course, always a topic that you're interested in. There's no purpose in learning a language and talking about something that you really don't care about. If you're never going to use the subject, there's no reason to include it in your language learning journey. So if you're obsessed with fly fishing, then maybe that's what you should focus your language learning goals on: the equipment, the places that you can travel, the type of boats that you might be interested in, the fishing equipment, places that you would buy those things, directions on how to fish, and things like that. Not, outer space if that's not your thing. Um, you can also plan what tenses to use. And this is really important because you don't want to say something that's too advanced because obviously it's going to discourage you. You want it to be just at your proficiency level, which you could test yourself or get tested. Um, you can first start small, obviously. You can do 3 topic sentences and just talk about, your day or whatever the subject is that you want to talk about. Highlight and correct your errors. One tip that I would give you is, if don't stop if you don't have a vocabulary word, just switch it to your native language. So if you don't know a word and you're writing, just switch it to your native language and then come back afterwards, correct it. And then that way you have the answers to what you were confused about before, and you can either rewrite it now or later, quiz yourself on it. Of course, using up the dictionary to find the words that you didn't know previously. And if you're doing that 100-day challenge that I usually talk about, then you want to write the topic again at the end of 10 days. And you also want to measure your improvement from beginning to end. So maybe even keep a notebook of your progress. Some examples of writing exercises could be summaries of podcasts or movies that you watched, book reports if you wanted to talk about a book and review it. And you can especially find communities, people in your target language online who are reading books in certain subjects. You can do album reviews. One thing that I have done is listen to music and then try to write down as many words as I can comprehend of the song, and then look up the lyrics and then correct myself later. Journaling, obviously, and you can even try to do something a little fun and challenging and write poems so that you can work on rhyming in a language. So it's a lot easier to do if it's in Latin text, especially if Latin text is something that you've been accustomed to your whole life. However, it gets a little bit more difficult when we start to talk about how to use these languages, how to use the writing methods when it comes to non-traditional or non-Latinized languages, with their own unique alphabet. So I've studied other languages that have other alphabets, but I've chosen 3 that I think are the best because they range in very simple to figure out, a little bit more difficult to figure out, and then extremely difficult to figure out. And this is not solely from my personal opinion, but also from opinion of other people that I've previously done the 100-day challenges with, other online communities that I'm a part of, even things that I've read from native English speakers. Of course, this varies depending on your native language. It also varies depending on, your work ethic and the time you have to put in. But I'm pretty sure that generally what I have to share is going to help you in some way if you are interested in using writing to gain better proficiency in a language. So the first one is Korean. I organized I organized my categories by writing system, complexity, the usage of characters, historical development, and the cultural significance of the writing, because a lot of times people seem to think that writing is a waste of time, and I don't understand that because again, like it's the most convenient way to learn. You don't have to wait for somebody to be awake. You don't have to wait on a tutor. You don't have to pay for a tutor. You don't have to travel to the country in order to use the language. And you can use it for as long as you want. You can use it for as short of a time as you want. You can use it anywhere because a notebook is pretty portable. Um, so, I would like for you guys to consider this. So I'm starting with Korean because I feel like Korean is a very simple alphabet to understand. There's only 24 letters, um, and they go from left to right or top to bottom. Um, they also are considered one of the simplest writing systems to learn because it is intentionally made easy to learn so that everybody can be literate. And that is a benefit in and of itself because obviously, because they wanted it to be easy to understand, it kind of, you know, makes it simpler for a foreigner to jump into the language and writing with it. Um, I started when I did Korean, just writing my notes in Duolingo, um, and writing, sentences out that I was stuck with or new words that would pop up. Um, and then I kind of graduated to listening to K-pop and trying to pick out phrases and words that I recognized from the music. And I didn't immediately go back and try to correct my lyrics or what I picked out. I would continue to study and then come back to the song and say, like, how much do I understand of it now? And um, that started to work out. But as funny as it is, like, it actually kind of evolved into me kind of getting a ukulele and playing the K-pop songs. So I would learn the phonics first, and then kind of as I was going, I would pick up the words, and that was also very helpful. Um, so I think to me, Korean not only was the simplest one to kind of follow this method with, but it was also the most fun. Uh, yeah. The historical development of Hangul was that it was created in the 15th century and it was intended to increase literacy. So this is basically like a historical gift to all of us who want to learn Korean. Um, and so I do hope that my suggestions and methods for Korean learners do help. Now, it got a little bit more difficult for me when I started with Arabic. Um, Mostly because Arabic has three different writings for each letter, depending on where it's placed in the beginning, middle, or the end of the word. And so it took a little bit, but again, one benefit was I just kept writing again and again and again and again and again, pages and pages. I started to use my writing pad so that I could like not waste so much paper because for me Arabic it took I thought it was going to take me like I thought I was going to knock it out in maybe a week or so, but it took me 2 or 3 weeks to actually get everything right and make the handwriting the way that I felt most happy with. One thing that I did miss to say is that you want to collect as many samples of handwriting as you possibly can. In these slides are examples of samples that I found. And as I started to write, I would pick up not every letter, but sometimes I would say, oh, I like this one or that one. And I would begin to, imitate what other people were writing. Sometimes they were native, sometimes they were just more advanced in the writing than me. And so that's what kind of helped me pick up the Arabic writing, along with, just trying to read the workbooks and texts that I was studying at the time. Um, One thing I like about Arabic is it is phonetic, just like Korean. So in that way, it's not so difficult. There's few strange rules, but um, it can, some people's handwriting can get iffy. For example, that ancient text right there would probably be a little bit difficult for me to read at this level, because I am still a beginner in Arabic. Um, but I really do like reading poetry in Arabic and trying to write sentences about what I think the poem is about or what I took away from the poem. That's one of the reasons why I decided to learn Arabic, was because I wanted to read poetry. And so that's been a really fun journey for me. I've met a lot of friends on online communities who like Arabic poetry and they share it with me. So that's been really, really fun to do. Now, the most challenging one for me, and probably the one that I have worked the hardest on, is Japanese. Now, I'm sure a lot of you know that Japanese is probably going to be the one that I say is the most difficult, because it absolutely is. The It's simple at first because you have two basic writing systems, the hiragana and the katakana, and those are phonetic. Um, there were times, because I was so intimidated by learning two writing systems, like just the first two, that I kind of stuck to hiragana for a really long time because it just felt comfortable. It wasn't until a friend of mine teased me for reading like a child that I decided that I needed to advance and read in kanji and learn my katakana. And one thing that I began to appreciate about this writing system is that there's a lot of history in it. The Chinese kanji, in addition to the katakana, kind of adds to context of, where things came from, how words got picked up in that language, in that country. I think it's really beautiful, but studying it is very hard, especially when you start to study by the JLPT standards, and it completely goes from, just like 50 words all the way to like way more than you could even imagine, like hundreds of words that you have to memorize. Um, but I will say that, after a while, it's kind of like remembering McDonald's signs and like other little iconography, and it kind of clicks in your mind. And I felt like when I started to write kanji versus just going through Anki cards or other kinds of flashcards, Duolingo games, whatever, I started to memorize it way faster because I had to force myself to memorize how to write it down if I was just to say something or have something to express. Japanese is kind of cool because you can say a lot in very small space. So, very cool language. So, as I mentioned earlier, the kanji characters were adopted from Chinese characters, and the hiragana and katakana are simplified forms of kanji characters. When I study Japanese, I like to kind of do calligraphy um, on my digital pad, and that's kind of what I how of a way for me to just kind of remember words as a pastime. There were some times where I would do maybe 5 kanji a day, um, and then I would flip through them at the end of the day, or like and quiz myself on which ones they were. So basically flashcards again. But the difference was I can't explain it, but because it was with my hand, it felt more real to me. It felt like I was able to understand the language a lot better than just looking at a computer or, just kind of hunching over a workbook. So now I have the takeaways for you guys that I want you to kind of feel like you left learning. The first is that input and output both work together to enforce your receptive and productive skills. So if you don't put a lot in your head, there's not going to be a lot to put out. And if you just put a lot in your head and you don't put anything out, again, remember I explained there's going to be that imbalance um, in your receptive and productive skills. And so that you don't fall victim to being that person who has a 1,000-day Duolingo streak but can't put a sentence together, I recommend that you start writing. Secondly, is that writing can help improve your memorization, pronunciation, and sentence structure. I cannot stress enough how much of a benefit writing is to pronunciation in a language, especially with one like French, but even ones like Korean and Japanese and Arabic, because for the most part, all of those have phonetic components to them that will give you clues into how the words are pronounced. And you can always write and then read back your writing to help yourself be a better speaker. The third is that exploring topics of interest will give you functional language skills. Please only study things that you are interested in and passionate about, because those are going to be the things that you're going to be excited to talk to others about. There's no point in wasting time on technical language you're not interested in, or even niche hobbies that you're never going to speak about. So please consider that when you are studying a language. And lastly, I wanted to tell you guys that different writing systems require different strategies. Because these writing systems do have um, different components to them that make them special and unique to memorize, they are going to require completely different strategies for you to study them. And that's my time. And I wanted to know if anybody had any questions now.
Yeah, so like I said in the chat, one thing I did when I first started learning Japanese was like I would write down every card I had in my Anki deck on a notebook. So I guess it's flashcards, but at the same time I did have that output because whenever I saw a word before I actually marked it as known or not known, I would write it down. And that actually helped me a lot. But I think that was specifically real helpful because I was using a pre-made deck, I guess, so I didn't have that connection with the phrases until I actually started writing them down and I actually felt like I knew it. So I guess that was really helpful for Japanese.
Yeah, I could definitely say the same. Like I started with Anki cards too. And I mean, because it's easy and it's convenient, and so many people have left amazing cards there for us to use. But I think, again, because and before I was too stubborn to write. I was way too stubborn to write anything at first. So um, when I started to write, I started to realize it was more productive for me to write some things I was interested in. And that's why I'm encouraging you guys to do the same. So thank you for sharing, because I do still like Anki cards. I'm not against them,
I
but
mean, I
they,
think. Yeah. No, I think what changed my mind on that is the fact that now I make my own Anki cards as well. So I think it was
Mhm.
really good for the fact that now I can mine vocabulary I care about. It's like, it's cool that I know how to say, I don't know, automatic vending machine in Japanese, but I don't think I'm gonna use that for
Right.
anything soon. So why would I learn how to write that? But what I do now is I just mine the vocabulary I actually care about. And the other thing I think, I'm kind of lazy when it comes to writing, honestly. But one thing I really like to do is that, and I'm doing it for Chinese specifically, it's that since I read a lot, those characters are in my head. I know the radicals, I just don't have the recall ability because I haven't developed it. So lately, what I've been doing is try to recall the characters I've seen while I read with flashcards. But the flashcards are just there to remind me which characters I should write, but really the whole learning process, actually writing them down, you know?
Heather says there's vending machines in everywhere in Japan, though, so maybe you will use it. That is true. Thank you so much, guys, for coming. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your time. Thank you so much.